About the third head of state for the Republic of Kenya now starts now. Tribute to the fallen head of state, His Excellency Mwai Kibaki, whose body has been lying in state in Parliament for the last 3 days. Yesterday was the last day. Hundreds of thousands of Kenyans went to visit. Now there's a state funeral starting on Nyayo National Stadium happening on Friday, and then we'll head back to Odaya in Nyeri, where the final burial rites will be conducted with full military honors. And with me in studios, Kivuda Kibwana, Governor for Makueni, is joining us online from Makueni. Thuita Mwangi, former PS Foreign Affairs and now running for Laikipia Senate, is also with us here in studio. Kibani Wamatangi, Senator Kiambu, and Governor Kiambu aspirant is with us in studio as well, and Dunstan Omari, advocate of the High Court. Governor Kibwana, I'll start with you on this one. How do you remember the fallen head of state, having been in service for this long?
I really remember him as a very excellent leader, a genuine patriot, somebody who was in politics for the people, not for himself. Somebody also from my academic background, I can rate as equal to leaders like Nyerere, like Mandela, like Nkrumah. Some of the foremost leaders who really wanted Africa to go places. Interestingly, with his history and all the power that, as a president, you're supposed to have, a very humble person, somebody who was a listener, who delegated responsibility, did not look to see, what ministers or others were doing on a daily basis, and somebody who really wanted always to create a consensus and wanted the best. And actually, even in the earlier debate that we had, even when he was chosen, deputy, those days, vice president of Kenya by Arap Moi, it was not because he was Mkikuyu, but it was because he had the ability to actually be a pivot of a government, even when he was not heard in terms of policy direction, in terms of implementation of a national agenda. So I am really in deep loss, condolences, not only to the family, of course the family is primary, but to the people of Kenya and the people of Africa. This is a leader whom all of us, as we mourn him, should seriously think of following his legacy and taking lessons from his leadership.
Thuita, as someone who's been in the public service, in terms of principles, how would you describe His Excellency Mwai Kibaki?
Trevor, allow me first to join fellow Kenyans in conveying our deep sympathies, especially to the family and the grandchildren of the late President Kibaki. This news was broken when we were somewhere in a meeting in Laikipia, and we interrupted this meeting because, apart from the shock, some of us who knew him closely felt heartbroken, and at a personal level, his passing on is a deep loss to me. Yeah. But let me say this, and I want to echo what my former professor, law school, Professor Kibwana, said about his transformative leadership. Yeah. And this has been the key plank in every tribute that we have so far heard about Kibaki. His effective leadership, his transformative leadership. Now, from where I was and working sometimes closely, this had everything to do with his ability to articulate his economic vision and have that vision for Kenya infused in virtually every policy, every intervention, including foreign policy. Yeah. And so here is a man who not only inspired those that he worked under him, but also he was able to organize government and those that worked in his government to be able to focus on one thing and one thing alone, deliver of services to the citizens.
Yeah.
And of course, he was very keen on how not only resources were mobilized, but how they were applied. And prudence was very central.
Yeah.
So when we talk about transformative leadership and achieving the transformation that everybody's talking about now, that was the leader.
Yeah.
And that there's nothing else other than that effective leadership that he provided.
You knew him on a personal level, and we know most people who are in the limelight usually have persona switch. Was he the same all through on a personal level, or when it came to work, there would be a different character that would kick in?
Clearly there was, at a personal level, at a point at which he was not engaging. For example, in my case, the president, because in our system, we have both the president being the head of state and head of government.
Yeah.
So he becomes the conductor of foreign policy, principally.
Yeah. And
because of that, you have this rare opportunity to spend a good amount of time with him. And of course, also manage his foreign policy and engagements with publics, manage his diary.
Yeah.
So if you're managing his diary, if you are ensuring that nothing in the day-to-day business of government, whether in State House or Harambee House, interferes with what was required in terms of his external business, then you made sure that what you're doing took not only overriding, but also you ensured that nothing interrupted. So that is how close you get to be able to manage the diary, go through the diary with the president, ensure that he's comfortable with not just the travel, but the engagements that you lined up for him.
Okay.
But more importantly, because you travel a lot abroad, there are those moments that, of course, he's not conducting business with Wananchi, and so he's relaxed. He's having a meal. He's, calm and conducts himself like just virtually everybody else. So we were able to observe him at a close range. And that quarter, that means that, therefore, you get to know both sides of the president. Yes.
Watangi, let me bring in on this. What lessons do young leaders like yourself draw from President Mwai Kibaki?
Okay, whatever. Besides declaring, or rather disclosing that Kibaki is personally my hero. Let me reminisce, just like everybody else, how I got to know the late President Mwai Kibaki. Because I remember the first time I ever set eyes on President Mwai Kibaki, I was a very young boy. And I was in Kericho those days. And I remember I used to play lawn tennis. I still do. I'm a player. And as we were playing lawn tennis, the court was very near a lawn, a grass lawn that's near there. So I hit the ball and it hit Mwai Kibaki.
No way.
At a place called Tea Hotel. So when it hit him, he just took the ball and walked casually to me and handed the ball back to me. So I looked at him and I saw this Mwai Kibaki whom I had hit with the ball. But he didn't even say anything. He just smiled at me and started to walk away and didn't even say a word. And that moment registered in my mind. And all the time I remembered that I hit Mwai Kibaki, the minister, with a tennis ball when I was playing. Then fast forward, I had admired him all the way along. And especially after that encounter. Then when he ran for president, I happened to have been just starting up my business, and those days I was in Dandora, here in Nairobi. And I remember one day when he was coming to campaign in Dandora, I took it upon myself and climbed on top of a wreck of a matatu to make sure that he saw me cheering him on, you know, with that memory that we had. And I really cheered him because I wanted him to win.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's the time he lost. Yeah, he didn't win, and I was as sullen as most of his supporters then. Then our third encounter was even more dramatic because then I had grown a bit of my political skills and muscle, and I was out in public business. Yeah. So one morning, as I was doing my things, there was a huge group of Mount Kenya leaders, comprising of eminent persons, retired Bishop Peter Jenga, other eminent business people, elderly people, not my age. And then I just happened to have been somewhere around Sagret Hotel very early in the morning. Yeah. And so I saw them. They were led by a good friend of mine who later became one of my good business mentors called Mwai. Then these guys were planning to go to State House just before the 2017 elections. Mm. And when they said they're going to see Kibaki, I implored them, please take me with you. Yeah. I want to go and talk to Mwai Kibaki. Because then I was having a big problem with what was happening, because I could see and feel the mood that we were not doing well, on ground. There's something that needed to be done. Yeah. And that was had to do with the president's own intervention. So they said, no, you are not on this list. Mm. So, in State House, when you enter State House, the list is read and you enter by name. How can you come? So I insisted. Yeah. And then my friend Mbugo said, okay, fine, come. If they allow you in, well and good. I told along. Yeah. We got to State House, and somehow I found my way in, and we went together. Yeah. So as all the wazes were sitting, there was a young man here sitting in the middle of the wazes, and, Bishop Matthew were there. So just to give you a perspective of the kind of people who are there. And then I'm sitting, they just talked to the president, they talked, they read memorandums that they had, and it was feeling good. Yeah. And the president was reassured that we are doing well. But then I said, that is what I know I have to tell the president. So when they had all finished, yeah. I said, Your Excellency, Mr. President, can I say something? Yeah. So I looked at Mwai Kibaki in the face. And all the wazes froze, because they're wondering, what has this guy who we don't even know what his agenda is, yeah. What does he want to say? So I looked at the president in the face, and I told the president that, Your Excellency, you're not going to win this election. And they all froze. I told him, you're not winning it unless you come out of State House and you come and go and talk to the people. Because what you have as information, including some of the memorandums yeah. that have been read, do not depict the actual situation. Because it is true, you have done well, you have raised the prices of milk, you have given free education, maize prices now are higher, and all those good things that you have done. But one thing that is missing yeah. is you have to come and talk to the people and tell them yourself, not somebody else on your behalf, that you want to be president. Mm. And he looked at me twice. He kept quiet. We left, and all the wazes, who are also my friends, today, they all froze. They said, what is wrong with this young fellow? Yeah. Who don't even come to say this thing? Then after that morning, the following day, I met with Mwai Kibaki while I was on top of my vehicle at Kikuyu flyover, when he was heading to the ground. Yeah. And he started his tour, and I waved at him and urged him on. And he went and hit the ground and went around the whole country. And that is how he got his presidency. I believe that was one of the things that, got people to turn out. Yeah. And so he's the one person I've admired all my life. Mm. I've liked and loved, and I believe if you listen to the mood of all the Kenyan people as they stream to pay their last tributes to him yeah. as he lies in state in Parliament. Yeah. I think the general quiet mood and resolve of the entire country is that we are going to rest a good man. Yeah. And that man is worth our respect. And indeed, what he has done and has been and has shown and immortalized yeah. in our minds and souls is that it is possible to have true servant leadership, that even at the level of president, you can be selfless, you can be, non-self-seeking, you can be detached and dispassionate about, enriching yourself. And serve your country and do a good job. Okay. And I believe that is one image and one mentality. It's a philosophy that I think we should inspire our young upcoming leaders to copy from Mwai Kibaki. Every time when I listen in Parliament, when those that served with him long are speaking, and I've listened to guys like James Orengo many times, and Professor Nyang' Nyong'o, we served together in the first Senate. And every time when they spoke about Mwai Kibaki, they spoke so well of him. Okay. How he would never entertain gossip, how he was resolute, how he would delegate power to a cabinet secretary and tell him, go do your work and only bring me results. Yeah. How the gentleman never at any one time cut a deal with anyone to benefit himself. And I think those qualities put together. And lastly, let me also remember how I came to learn how he did the Thika Superhighway. And one of the most amazing things is that if you remember, Trevor, and most of us do, there is no single day when you saw Mwai Kibaki going there to try and claim self-accolades that he has done the country proud, he has built a big road, he has done whatever. I mean, people came to muse themselves when they saw what kind of work he had done once it was complete, and they were getting lost on a highway that they didn't even know how to use. Yeah. And what we are saying is that if leaders could emulate the late President Mwai Kibaki, this country would be a big country. It would be a great country, would be successful. All right. And I believe and I hope that is what personally I'm working towards, and I've always aspired to be, and that is what I intend to be in the course of my leadership.
All right. Omari, the late president seemed to have a Midas touch. Nobody has anything ill to say about him. What was it about the president that he somehow figured the leadership of this country and towed the line in a place where varied opinion is the order of the day?
Well, thank you very much. I will admit that unlike the others who had personal contact with the late president, I didn't have that chance to have a personal contact on one-on-one. But that doesn't mean that I am not grounded to comment about what is known. When I look at Kibaki, you've said the late president had a Midas touch in everything that he does. I will look at that question in light of 5 principles, the perspectives I will look at Kibaki. One, Kibaki the economist and the blueprint master. Yeah. Way back when he was a lecturer at Makerere University, he came back, he was called to come back and develop a document on how Kenya, a new country that has gained independence, is going to deal with its economic challenges. Sessional paper number 10, which is a foundation on which this country is built. The economics of this country are laid under sessional paper number 10. Yeah. It is Mwai Kibaki who drafted it. And out of it, we have always had a link towards development and the management of our economic policy based on that sessional paper number 10, which is a milestone. Yeah. That was that time. When still he left sessional paper number 10, and he was at the Ministry of Finance, he developed another policy called the District Focus for Rural Development. Where take development to the district. There was no county at that time. This is what later Kenyans came to call devolution counties. So Kibaki, in his economic blueprint, already saw the reason to take economic development to the really local Wanjiku under the district focus for rural development, and it was completely assisted by the late Simeon Nyachae. Then they pushed that agenda. The district started growing up. Yeah. After that, in the economic arena, when 2003, Kibaki took power, him and together with Professor Nyang' Nyong'o developed the poverty eradication document, under which still the NAC government of 2002-2013 was working on. 2002 to 2007. That was the blueprint that put Kenya's development, the GDP, to grow in a very fast rate. Come again, still the Kibaki, the blueprint master, developed the Vision 2030. That now we should not be looking at development today, we should be looking development in a futuristic approach, because this country is not going anywhere, this country belongs to us. So when you look at that history, that trajectory, you understand that when we talk of Kibaki, the economist, and the master of the economy, the 4-5 documents are presented, tells you that. Number two, when I look at Kibaki in terms of public service and the public service, you will say that in all this agenda, Kibaki believed in one, that the public service should be disengaged from the politics of the day. Allow people who have been appointed to work under institutions, not on personalities. So that if my senior, Twitter, is the PS for Foreign Affairs, there is a law that he will use to do his job. He does not need to ask President Kibaki, what do I decide? So he allowed the institutionalization of public service. This concept, we have captured it in the Constitution today by creating independent officers, independent commissions, and giving power to those institutions and not individuals. So we can also look at him as the father of the independence of the public service. Remember, this is a reflection to when originally the old constitution was, people used to serve at the pleasure of the president, the public service. Kibaki came in and said, you serve according to the law that is there. If you are aggrieved, draft a bill, take it to parliament to amend and insert those powers that you need. Third angle, I look at Kibaki as a politician in relation to elections. Kibaki, the late Kibaki, you'll remember, in 1988, we went under this country into a Mlolongo type of elections, where you queue behind people, Kenyans, some of them who were born under Kibaki, and the others might not be knowing this, that in 1988, you queue behind somebody, Twitter carries all Akinomari to Laikipia, we queue behind him, the line is counted, and that is the final result. Twitter goes to the Senate based on that. Kibaki, there was an attempt to rig him out of the Mlolongo system. He stood firm, and out of Kibaki's resistance, we now went back to the universal suffrage that Kenyans are going to enjoy in August. So you can see the resistance of Kibaki at that time. Fourth question, is Kibaki the person who people thought that he's a fence-sitter, that he can never make a serious political move? Kibaki resigned from his position on a Christmas day, and the president could not believe that Kibaki can stand and resign. So in one of the issues, tributes I give to him, his resignation created a serious movement towards the birth of the multi-party democracy that we came to have in 1992, where the elections now started. The term of the president is no longer till death. It is regulated, and it has a tenure of 10 years. Kibaki formed a party called the DP, the Democratic Party of Kenya, which is still today. He now brought about the birth of multipartyism. The question at that time was, the opposition had galvanized themselves under Ford, led by the late Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, And the question was, will other people bring in the birth of multi-party, or will remain with the Ford against KANU, led by the late President Kenyatta? Kibaki formed a third force called the DP party. Then Matiba came in, split from Ford and formed the Ford Asili. Yeah. And in 1992, for the first time, Kenyans had an option of 4-4. KANU under Mwai, we had the DP under Kibaki, we had Ford Asili under Matiba, and we also had the Ford under Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. So he contributed immensely in the birth of that. Okay. Lastly, when I look at Kibaki in terms of management of state affairs, we need to emulate this late hero in terms of management of state affairs. There was less noise under Kibaki's government. There was few, I'm told, Matangi and Duita and others will tell you, I hear that if you could take gossip to Kibaki, he will call the person you are gossiping about, and as you are walking in telling him this, the other guy is called in and you are told, now, tell me about this man. Yeah. You have been telling me how bad these guys. No. So he really was very transparent, and he must have understood Article 10 of the Constitution that let public affairs be managed away from personal interest, away from what you don't like. Let us follow the law. So there lies the hero of this country, and now the question, the two politicians. Can they focus more because they'll be elected? The public, the ground seems to be with the governor and the senator in Laikipia. Can they follow this so that we develop a country devoid of politics in management of public affairs, so that the political angle does not interfere with the public issue? Okay. I only take great exception to what I can read on Standard, the Secret's day of Kibaki was sworn in.
We'll come to that in just a bit. That was the big blemish on his particular tenure on this. But let me bring in Governor Kibwana on this. Governor, would you say that you are using Kibaki's blueprint in your leadership? Because there are those who are saying in the 50 years of service, I struggle to remember at any given point where Kibaki was mentioned, leave alone whether acquitted or not, just mentioned on a corruption issue.
Well, I think in terms of this debate that we're having, which is very interesting, and it's really a nationwide debate in terms of really excavating the values that Kibaki stood for, the principles that he used in statecraft. We will remember, or we should remember, during his second term, there was also considerable opposition in terms of others wanting to, defeat him in the 2013 first of all elections, and then subsequently. And it took also some work to win the 2007 elections. So, one would ask, and this is a question that we can ask to all Kenyans, if really we are defining Kibaki this way, why is it that in 2007, and all the politicians are really glowingly talking about him, how come we did not recognize that and therefore say, this person who has saved us from all those problems of the old KANU, and who has begun to shine our country, we should be able to, support him easily so that he can conclude the next 5 years. And even after that, he should not be able to have a hard time getting the country together away from considerable political noise and secure it even further. So even as I was reflecting about Kibaki's times, particularly because I was involved with him in 3 phases. The first phase being when we were in the 80s and the late 80s and the 90s, especially the 90s, when I was the chair of the constitutional movement. And we were there together with political opposition, with the NGOs, even getting to the point where we endorsed him as a presidential candidate, and then getting involved as his cabinet assistant minister and the cabinet secretary. Cabinet secretary today, but cabinet minister, and then as his advisor. So I think we need to genuinely discuss this question. When leaders are exemplary, why is it that we appear to resist them? And even it was actually after Kibaki left that we began to say that this was a special man. This was really a special leader. This is somebody who, you know, you can compare them with anybody from the continent. And I think my learned friend has really methodically described, you know, to a very large extent, how Kibaki ran a country in a thoughtful manner, employing thought leadership, employing planning, employing meticulous execution. And when we say these things, they are true. But I think I still pose the question, why do we have to wait to recognize somebody in a proper way in his death or in death? And therefore, even as we say, we will follow these principles.
Yeah.
What assurance is there that we will? What commitment do we demonstrate? Or is this the period of simply saying nice things,
yeah,
and then we forget to really seriously interrogate and embrace these principles and this exemplary leadership,
yeah,
that he offered? So I think there is a lot of thinking by us, all the political people,
yeah,
all leaders in other spheres. It's easy to say this was a good man, and we want to also be good men and women like him. And hiyo ndio changamoto. That's really,
yeah,
that's what I'm as I reflect about his life, our working relationship. I'm saying, can we learn something and be able to take Kenya to another level,
yeah,
on the principles that he guided us? And to come back and answer your question,
yeah,
even as I came to be a governor, I discussed it with him, and because initially I did not want to be a governor, I wanted to be the chair of the Constitutional Commission. I did an interview. I did very well. I was #1, but then to be some other consensus building and so on. So I didn't get that position. So as now I said, I wanted to be governor. And of course, Trevor, when you're introducing the rest, you're saying one is going to be a senator, the other one, you know, a governor and so on. And I have offered, but after the people have asked me to be senator of Makueni after this stint. But when I went to him, it was important for me to first of all learn from that rich history.
yeah,
You know, how do you do this so that you make a difference? And he said, plan. And that is why we came up in Makueni with a Vision 2025 to say, and this is something that we did with our people. Actually, to get it, we had about public participation of about 100,000 people from village upwards. What do you want us to do together? Not just the manifesto of a politician or Muungano party then. And, you know, he said, in terms of your civil service, the people that you work with, respect them, make them respect them, make them feel that they are not just working for you, that they are working with you for the people of your county.
okay,
And make sure that this performance management, because that was one important thing that Kibaki introduced, so that your work can be measured. You know, make sure that that happens there.
Okay.
And then this question of integrity, this question of lack of corruption and so on. That is something that, again, he told me is very, very important, to the extent that even today, Makuene is one of the, I think, counties, and even one of the places on the continent where we have open contracting. Every information about contracting is open to the public. So I think in terms of his mentorship and being his political student, that has really helped me. And this is my plea. This is what I was talking earlier. Yeah. It is my plea. Let us not just recognize what he has done, but let us emulate him for real. Yeah. And Kenya, and that's really how we can appreciate his life. Okay. And embrace his legacy.
Okay. And the professor is raising a very interesting point. How do we have the right leaders who exemplify Kibakism that seems to be a concept and a movement now, and Kenyans are heading to the elections on the 9th of August? How do they ensure that they have the right leaders who exemplify what Kibaki really stood for? Because we all agree that he was a gentleman by excellence, a great leader, someone of absolute integrity, no blemishes. But then how come we end up still electing some people who do have blemishes?
Well, that is the challenge. And in fact, that has been part of my conversation as I meet people about what to look for in leadership. And I believe what is now public conversation and debate around his legacy is bringing out very interesting qualities of leadership. And I hope this will inform not just those who are young and who are going to be the first voters after attaining 18 years, who probably 10 years ago were too young to understand, to follow, to observe, and to learn the kind of leadership that he brought forth. So I think this is an opportune moment for us to be more reflective, even as we pay tribute to Kibaki and his leadership qualities, his effective leadership. And I said earlier, everything is around effective leadership. There's no magic bullet, there's no rocket science. Yeah. The fact that he was able to deliver, the fact that he was able to provide the kind of things we're talking about now and achieve the transformation that everybody's talking about has everything to do with leadership. And I believe the focus will be on leadership, perhaps less attention will be paid to political parties. Yeah. And so I think it's really a moment of just not reflecting on his death and his legacy, but also on reflecting the way forward, especially with regard to leadership. Yeah. It's giving us an opportunity and open public discussions about his leadership. Okay. I happen to have also worked in the cabinet office, and therefore I recall his focus on reforms, just focusing on systems and structures and creating efficient systems that worked. And that, to me, again, is also reflecting on the kind of leadership that we have now. People who are bold, people who do not go about waiting for the fleeting mood of the public before they take decisions. People who do not look at the headlines every morning and then change. Because as a leader, he directed, he conducted, he managed public affairs, and I doubt he even cared much about what was written in the headline news. So that is what the leadership is all about. Okay. Yeah.
And let's talk about leadership at a time of crisis. And Omari brought this up a bit. Flashback to 2007, 2008, the most trying times for the country in Kenya, where more than 1,300 people lost their lives after him being sworn in. Do you think he exemplified leadership at that point? There was a crisis. And is this the only blemish in his tenure in your own way?
Yes, as I answer that, Trevor, can I probably also apply my mind a little to some of the issues that were raised by Governor Kibwana? Yeah. And also to wish him well. I didn't know that he's running for Senate. I think AG, because you're the drummer. Yes. In this show.
AG should have informed you.
No, you should drum beat for him also.
I will.
But anyway, I think he's a good man. That question that he raises, why is it that we wait until a leader is dead like Kibaki for us to sing his praises and talk good of him. Probably governor needs to remember that to go to heaven you must die. You know, and you can't become a martyr until you're dead. I'm sure even in Kikamba, governor, in Kikuyu we have a saying that says that I mean, you know, a cow is said that it had good milk and a lot of milk once it is dead.
Yeah.
I'm sure there could be something similar in the Kamba community sayings. But this is human nature. Actually, most of the time, you find that it's very rare that people want to. If you know that there are very tormenting moments that Kibaki went through.
Yeah.
During his tenure, especially like that time when you've raised Trevor, during that 2007-2008 crisis, because for all his mettle and all his stealth and self-composure and focus, those were times when he went through, you can put it in quotes, hell, because he had the responsibility to put and hold this country together. And yet, the storm was heavy and big. There were competing political interests. There were insinuations, and I think that's what AG was referring to when he was talking about that, the write-up in the Standard about what really transpired and the events, you know, that Kivuitu announced the results. There were results that were not correct, which is something that indeed I would want to say to you, Trevor, having participated now in 5 elections, 4 general and one actually more, because I've participated in maybe another 3 or 4 nominations. And so that kind of thing is probably the nature of politics. You find that you have results coming in, there's a disputed, there's a claim there, but how he handled that crisis, another crisis, Trevor, let's not forget, because we can compare the two. Do you remember a time when he even had his personal crisis brought to public? Remember, during when people were talking about when Mama Lucy, the late, and God rest her soul in peace, when she had to go to one of the media houses at night because she found like, you know, her family's privacy was being intruded upon, and it was glared to the entire country, and that's a sitting president, and he has to contend with it. Remember, when Mama had to stand next to him and beside him for him to proclaim that there is only one and only, you know, a wife. And as a man, you know, I'm saying this because you know, I'm a married man, and I know what that means. and I'm sure you're going to be getting there very soon. But these are the gentlemen are, and you know, that's tight. You know, for a man of family, when in the full glare of cameras, you have to stand there, and there are claims here and claims there, and you have to look that camera in the eye, and people are saying, "Oh, look at him! He has to bow down to the pressure of, you know, wife, that he has to declare this," and people even try to make fun of it. You remember that time, but you know, it is now in hindsight, the determination, the stealth, you know, the composure, the ability to see beyond and know that his commitment to family and to ensure that he gets through with his family as he started overrides all those other, you know, considerations at that time.
Yeah.
And that would give you a good idea as to what kind of man would he be when it comes to containing other national issues, including then the kind of pressures that he had to deal with during that 2007-2008 crisis.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I said this about President Daniel Arap Moi. I was one time here when we were discussing about it, and I said, I would repeat it this morning, that one of the credentials and mantles that Moi will go down in history with was that when he had all power that he could have used to his advantage in 2002, he chose not to. And he chose patriotism and statesmanship over personal, triumph.
Yeah.
And he agreed to hand over power when he could very easily have refused to or found other ways, to corrupt that election. And the same thing you would say of President Kibaki, because even during that time, remember, our system is such that you hand over power as president just on the immediate. There's no time when you're not president.
Yeah.
When you're taking over, when you're running, if it is a transition period. And so even at the moment when he was still waiting for those results to come, he was still president.
Yeah.
And he could have used other means and games, even as people now focus more on what Kivuitu said, on whatever, he still could have pulled other plugs and diverted the whole of that thing, and maybe brought in military, brought in the police force or anything.
Yeah.
But he allowed democracy to prevail. And so I would want probably to urge even those of us that look at that history to remember that those were moments of serious personal restraint.
Yeah.
But let me finalize by bringing in probably an issue that may be controversial as we discuss about what we are discussing, and this which relates very well to Kibaki, Trevor, and I think is an issue that we would need to be thinking about and talking about is how, as a country, do we want to be resting our presidents when they have passed on? I think this is a question that would be asking ourselves, because when I look at after President Jomo Kenyatta passed on, you see we interred him and we have rested him at the mausoleum next to Parliament. And remember, all these presidents are part of our eternal history.
Yeah.
I mean, it matters to this country that if generations and generations want to learn how we liberated ourselves, who took over, how Kenyatta did what he did with his other heroes, and then handed over to Mwai and so on. Would we, as a country, want to have a more organized, maybe centralized way of resting our heads of state? I mean, do we want to have President Mwai have his mausoleum and his resting place in Kabarak? Now Kibaki will be in Othaya. I heard that there were discussions that the family of Mr. Jomo Kenyatta may want to be taking his remains after some time from the mausoleum and maybe have them rested in Gatondo, his home.
Yeah.
Would we be better off as a country probably having a conversation around why not, for example, expand that mausoleum that we have already built, and once you expand it, make it a museum of history or a place of history for heads of state, that you could dress them there and have the histories of our presidents in succession, just like the way, Trevor, let me finalize that point, just the way if you today walk into any cathedral, you'll find that they have the photographs of the first mayor, the second mayor, the first bishop, the second bishop, the third bishop, the whatever, until the reigning. If you go into any of the other offices of civil servants, you'll find that that's the first one, the second one. I mean, they have that. Yeah. If you go to most of the other countries, you'll find that history is preserved. I've had an opportunity to go to Hiroshima, and I went to, the place where they have immortalized the fate of what happened to those people. You find that the remains are there, they have a good history of everything and everybody. Same thing has happened in Rwanda after the genocide. They have preserved that history. I was musing to my mind and asking ourselves, why not have a conversation? Why not have probably a law that requires then that when somebody is elected head of state, even the family knows that that person has been owned. And by the way, it is not a new concept. In the Catholic faith, and even in other religions, if you die when you are a father at a certain level, you have to be buried here at St. Mary's. And your family agrees to it. So that kind of concept, would it help us manage our history well, so that you could have our presidents interred at the mausoleum? It is expanded. Maybe it's
time to have that conversation.
That our people.
We're running out of time here, but I need just quick, brief remarks on what you had talked about. Was this the blemish on his leadership in 2007, 2008, and did he exemplify leadership in a time of crisis at that moment?
I totally agree with you and with Senator Matangi and Governor Matangi in the making, and Senator Frida. And also, I also went to University of Nairobi. I never had a chance to be taught by Governor Kivuitu, but I read his books. Tremendous respect and congratulations, and wish him the best to be a senator. Well, I come from West Mogrango. I wish my candidate for MP position, Steve Mogaka, the best also to win for the West Mogrango MP seat. On this question, very many Kenyans are trying to get what I call a crisis identity, to take advantage of Kibaki name and associate themselves with Kibaki. For example, the Standard has disclosed the governor for Machakos and the candidate for ODM seat in Westlands, Kisia. They have given some emotional outbursts on what really happened at KICC. It is very unfortunate. It is very unfortunate that this is coming from people who were in positions of government. Twitter, PS that time, still appears now, cannot start now giving out stories of information that came to his possession by virtue of his office. And this is a serious indictment that public service. We are now getting people who are sitting in public service who do not understand how the code of secrecy and the oath, this information cannot be verified.
Yeah.
The elections were declared a winner. The politics of the behind scenes of how this show is being managed by the producers behind is not for the public domain. So I think that we shall be demanding an apology from the governor of Machakos and Kisia that such utterances are baseless. They are not anywhere. They simply want to get the people seeing that they were heroes. Remember, there is a battle in Ukambani. We started it with who becomes the governor, who becomes the deputy president, the running mate of Raila Odinga. Is it Mutua, Governor Mutua? Is it Professor Governor Senator Kivuda? Is it Governor Ngilu and the rest? That should not completely close our eyes to what Kibaki did as a hero. All this, to me, is crisis taking advantage of the mourning that we are mourning, people to be relevant. Of great importance is that Kibaki, for the first time, managed crisis. Two crises that we very, very well. The first one, in 1974, there was a clamor to change the constitution because the late President Jomo Kenyatta was reaching his sunset years. There was a serious battle, and Kibaki and Njonjo, the late, were part of that battle. Kibaki, on one side, stood by the law and said, we cannot tribalize the politics of succession. If Mwai is by law supposed to take power in the event of the death of the president, within 90 days an election is done, that is the law. He stood firm and managed that crisis. The country was going to collapse. The Ngorokos, people had started organizing themselves in ragtag militias called Ngorokos and the others. So Kibaki did that. Number two, in 2007, in 2002, Kibaki stood firm and said he will carry the ticket of Kenyans and deliver Kenyans out of the yoke of KANU. A very strong position he took. He was unwell. He was completely down. He stood firm and liberated the country and managed that crisis very well. The third issue is the elections of 2007. Kibaki, for the first time, after the elections were done, he magnanimously said we can share power. If he was a selfish man, if he was, say, a guy says, oh, I've been given the sword, I'm the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, all the soldiers get out and crush the opposition, this country could not be where it is. He accepted to share power for the sake of the republic. For the sake of the republic. A similar thing that President Uhuru Kenyatta has done in the handshake, that how do we manage this crisis? Are we going to regiment ourselves and keep firm and say, I'm entitled, I'm the commander-in-chief, we can't share. So when you look at those 3 occasions, Kibaki comes out as the only president who could, politicians say they listen to the ground. Kibaki was listening and seeing what the ground wants. And therefore, to me, he exemplifies give and take. He exemplifies magnanimity, and he exemplifies the public good against his selfish interest.
All right. Governor Kibwana, as we close on this conversation, 103 days Kenyans now go to the polls. What should they keep in mind as you give us your closing remarks?
Yes, you know, very interesting conversation. I wish there was more time. That point about people being buried, presidents being buried in a common place. You see, we have defined our politics mostly on tribal basis. And these leaders, most of them, you know, of course there are exceptions, are considered as tribal kingpins. I don't quite think Kibaki was a, you know, tribal kingpin. He was a national, you know, leader. But after they finished service, they want to go, you know, when they are now called by God, apart from family demands, but the tribe wants the person to be buried in the tribal lands. So when we make our politics more national, then what Wamatangi is suggesting is likely perhaps to gain more currency. And Wamatangi did, senator and governor did forget that there are instances where God took some people to heaven before they were dead. So I think let us not, this point about we need to appreciate leaders when they are alive, and we need not to give them a hard time for the sake of just giving them a hard time. I think that is, I still keep on insisting on that particular point. And just to say that even in 2007-8, as Omari, you know, has said, there were still leaders, and I don't want to give details, who were still saying that, you know, let us continue. We can overrun, you know, the opposition. And Kibaki, I think, had to actually eventually make this decision and say that, you know, I want to make this decision. I'm the head of state, and we will have this government of national unity. And indeed, the country has been characterized more by tribal handshakes, not necessarily ideological handshakes, because we remember Raila and Mwai had a handshake. We remember Kibaki and Raila had a handshake, and now Raila and Uhuru, you know, have a handshake. Maybe even there will be a handshake of somebody and Ruto, we don't know. So I think that's something that we need to, as we mourn our president, we need to ask ourselves, what shall we do so that we don't have to have, you know, like our systems almost breaking. Like these elections is going to be very close. That are the indications. So do we want to make an handshake before the elections or after the elections so that we don't have a conflict? As we conclude, one thing that also Kibaki did, despite the 2005 failure of the constitution, the former constitution having, you know, been changed so that in the referendum that the constitution failed. But by 2010, he was very instrumental so that those within his ranks who are even trying to say no to the constitution, he said, no, I promise that this is going to be one of the most important things I deliver with Kenyans. And from where I set those times, I know that if he didn't have that resolve, maybe the constitution would have, you know, been postponed. And so I think in this period until we have the elections, first of all, we must cultivate this idea: if you lose, you accept you have lost. Because if somebody loses and they say, I didn't lose, we could go back to 2007-8. So that's a conversation we need to have.
Okay.
And we need to say that, you know, when you're campaigning, you don't, you know, abuse people, you don't do the things that lead to those kinds of problems. But I think we are in a good place. There is good competition.
Yeah.
And let's really focus on nationalism, on patriotism,
All right.
not just arranging ourselves on basis of tribes, because this is what keeps on making us fail.
All right. Twitter, just about a minute because we're running out of time here. 103 days with the elections. What should Kenyans focus on now? What should be top of mind as they go to the polls?
Effective leadership,
Yeah.
transformative leadership, tested leadership,
Yeah.
record in terms of integrity,
Yeah.
in terms of trust, in terms of, in fact, throughout, Kenyans should be looking at examining, looking at, scrutinizing those who have offered themselves,
Yeah.
and put aside for a moment the political parties,
Yeah.
and look at the individuals. That way, we will no doubt
Yeah.
have leadership that will emulate, that will stand out on the same path as Kibaki, that we are now mourning, but also paying tribute to.
Yeah.
I must say that, of course, that we must have leaders who are bold, firm, and who are ready and willing to take tough decisions for this country. Kibaki came at a time when there was crying out for change and reforms, and he did exactly that. He created a secretariat in his office to spearhead public service reforms. He achieved much of that because he went beyond what anybody could imagine. That he's restructured, he shaped and streamlined systems, and we take it for granted that things are working now efficiently. But it was because of his bold leadership. Fearless, and of course, Professor Kibaki has talked about tribalism. I happened to, as I said, observing him at close quarters, this is a man who you'd never hear him utter a word in his mother tongue, in the public at least. And I never did. And in each case, you made sure each proposal, brief, or suggestion that you made, it did not carry those traits of, leaning towards his. If you allow me a minute, Trevor, I'll tell you an incident that I still stands out to me. I was, through his directive, we brought out this economic diplomacy issue. He addressed ambassadors in his first, when I was just appointed, newly appointed, and he told ambassadors, I am the head of state. You are going to be representing me as the head of state. But more importantly, I want all of you ambassadors to be salesmen for Kenyan business and Kenyan farmers. Create opportunities, seek advantages abroad, and bring investors to this country. Do not write briefs on political issues that happen wherever you are. That was the beginning of what we now have as economic diplomacy, which has taken a center stage in the conduct of our relations with other. This was one of his very critical legacies. And when I went to him and told him that we had managed to get one of the big chain of supermarkets in the UK, I think it was Marks and Spencer, to come to Kenya and pilot on Kenyan tea and ensure that each and every one of the outlets would carry Kenyan tea. And on a pilot basis, they wanted to come and partner with one of the factories. That factory, by some coincidence, happened to have been in his own village. And when he was very happy about the idea of 3,000 outlets globally selling Kenyan tea, but when the word was mentioned that the pilot's factory will be in his Othaya constituency, very near his home, he said, no. How did you arrive at that? And had no answer. And the only thing he said, well, okay, have you consulted the Ministry of Agriculture and the Kenya Tea Development Authority and so on? And we had not, because we were driving this as a foreign ministry and as part of our economic diplomacy. And that was the end of it. We never went to the Othaya factory. And we had to go back to the drawing board. But the bottom line is, this is a man who wanted the shape, makeup, everything to reflect the regional balance in appointments of ambassadors and high commissioners and so on and so forth. And many times he rejected people who went to him directly, seeking, those kind of favors.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was, to me, the leadership that everybody should be looking at this time around during elections, as we reflect on the qualities that we need to seek out and identify. Thank you.
Wamatangi, 1 minute, closing remarks.
Well, Teva, that 103 days question that you asked, I think I'll be saying to Kenyans, I think it's time to think about ourselves more, think about our country more, and less of thinking about political leaders and what they stand for, and this misconception about the interests of all of us only being held and carried by one individual because they lead us in a political party. And because that's what has caused us to go through what we've just been speaking about, from the year 2002 onwards, 2007, and now the subsequent elections. Trevor, because it's important for Kenyans to know that the evidence we saw in London Ward a few months ago, the evidence that we saw in Kabuchai, is enough to tell us that we are still not out of the woods yet. And if the wrong messaging, if the wrong people are given an opportunity to once more take the lead in showing and shaping how our people are going to respond to various issues at this time when you have an election, that we could still find ourselves back to the precipice. And so I want to urge our people that love your country more, love yourselves more, and think less of how glorious it is that you have one person or persona out there that you want to praise, that you want to see that they have taken leadership, be they a governor, be they a senator, be they a president. And what we must insist of our leaders is, even as you stand out there to tell us what you're going to do for us, tell us more of what you will do for Kenya and for Kenyans and as a whole, and unite us more. I believe that that's the vision we carry in the Kenya Kwanza alliance, and that's a fact, Trevor. And I know you may smile at it because you're not a politician.
I'm smiling because this was not a chance to campaign.
These are political times, and we have to tell people precisely how things are. And I believe that in our coalition, that's what we stand for. We have very hard tried to shun and stay away completely from anything that may propose or presume that we want to have an arrangement that segments this country into small collections. We are saying we stand for a united Kenya as a coalition.
All right, Romari, closing remarks, 1 minute.
My closing remarks are that, one, let us put our closing remarks in light of Kibaki. Kibaki never dissented an election. Kivuda Kibwana, professor, said very well, the culture of accepting that in any contest, there's a loser, there's a winner. Kenyans, if you have lost in Jubilee, if you have lost in Kenya Kwanza, stop this argument that I never lost. You are running to another house, claiming, shedding tears all over that you never lost. For the presidential candidates, let us have it firm very clearly that we do not want to see a 2007 repeat where there is one party that feels they have lost. 2007, there was no independent judiciary. Kenyans tell those politicians, especially the presidential candidates, that let everybody, whoever loses, goes to the Supreme Court. The court is now constituted 7 judges ready to hear your dispute. We, the lawyers, are there. We'll present your case for God's case. Let not any presidential candidate incite Kenyans to violence. And Kenyans, let us not be cheated to carry stones to throw against an opponent. Allow everybody to compete. The IBC is going to declare when official campaigns are going to start. Allow everybody to go everywhere. Let us not zone
Okay.
Matangi, the governor, said he has invited anybody to come and campaign in Kiambu, similar to Laikipia, similar to Makueni, similar to West Mogrango, as I said, for Steve Mogak. Let us agree on this question. Okay. Kenyans, this is our country. If we destroy it, we have no any other country to go. Remember, America is no longer an option. People used to disappear to America. Nowadays, Kenyans are coming from America to this country, courtesy of the foundation president, the late Kibaki laid.
All right, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for having this conversation with us. Kivuda Kibwana, governor for Makueni, and also running for Senator Mwai, former PS Foreign Affairs and running for Laikipia Senate, and Kimani Wamatangi, Senator Kiambu, and running for Governor Kiambu, and Danstan Omari, advocate of the High Court and hoping to be Attorney General at some point in his life. Thank you so much for having this conversation with us. The body of the former late president now, Mwai Kibaki, lies in state for now. On Friday, there's a state funeral at Nyayo National Stadium. They've said that you should be seated by 8 a.m. All right? That's where we leave it for now. Next up is Cooking Tips. See you in a bit.